Welcome to my channel So Stylish with Elsie. In today's video I wanted to talk a little bit more about pants fitting and specifically how a crotch extension affects the fit of your pants. Now some of the words that I am going to be using, and I just want to clarify it for those of you that's new to pattern making, is going to be, for instance, crotch length. And if I talk about crotch length, that is the measurement that I would take from the front of my waist through the center of my body to the back waistline. And that is basically this measurement that you would see here from the back waist to that crotch point, and then I also pick it up from the front crotch point to my waistline. So that is going to be my crotch length that I talk about. When we talk about crotch level, that is the level that you see here from the crotch point to my side seam, and it's on my front and my back pattern. And when we draw this crotch level line, we've got to make sure that we go through 90 degrees through that grain line. Then we also talk about our crotch extension, and that is what we're talking about today. And that is basically this extension that we see on our pants pattern. And then we also talk about crotch depth. Now crotch depth is basically the measurement from your waist to that crotch level. That's a body measurement that you will go and do if you're working more with your commercial patterns, not really necessary for my Surfer Designs pattern, but that is where I would have elastic in the waist, and you would have seen videos where people say go sit down on a chair, measure from that waist to your basically that base of the chair. Or another way that you can do it, that's the way that I prefer to do it, is to take a thin elastic and put it right on the top of my thigh, basically where I go onto that crotch level line, if you imagine this line, and then I measure from that elastic to my waistline, and that's also going to give me my crotch depth. Now that is the terminology that we usually use when we are working with the foundation of the pants. Now when I'm saying foundation of the pants, foundation is from this crotch level up to the waist. This is where most of the fitting is going to happen. When we look from the crotch level down to the hem, that is basically when we start looking at the style of that leg or the silhouette that we want for our pants. So the foundation is really basically this area, crotch level up, and that is where we tend to do most of the changes, making sure that the crotch curve is correct, the crotch length is correct. And now I'm going to talk to you about correcting that crotch extension as well. Now I just wanted to touch on my Surfer Designs pattern that I do have in front of me, and this is really for me the best way if you are wanting to start working and making your own pants, is to go and take your measurements. We've got grading dots on our Surfer Designs pattern, and there I'm going to be using my personal measurements on that grading dot. I also take into consideration where was my high hip measurement done, my low hip measurement done, and that tracing vellum that I put over my master pattern I can shift up or down so that I know that where I do that high hip or low hip measurement, it is corresponding to my measurements on my body. So it does take out a lot of, I wouldn't say almost stress out of working with a commercial pattern, and I've got to go and look at that crotch depth and where is the high hip or the low hip situated. So if ever you want to start working and making your own patterns for your pants, go and have a look at our Surfer Designs pants pattern. But now let's move on to the demonstration where I'm going to talk you through this crotch extension. Now crotch extension is actually very, very important when we are doing pattern work. If we look at a crotch extension on a basic pattern, the person that designed that pattern, or let's say our master pattern that we're working with, always take your full hip measurement, and it's a percentage of that full hip measurement that then gets used to do the crotch extension on a basic pattern. Now all of us are built differently. Some of us might have a slimmer thigh. I've got a fuller thigh, so I've always got to take my thigh measurement into consideration. And because that crotch extension is basically to cover the inner thigh, it is a really important measurement to work with to make sure that it's going to work with my thigh measurement. As I said, the next person might be fuller on the tummy, you're more of an apple shape, but you've got a slimmer leg, so that extension is going to be too long for you because again it's taken into consideration what that hip measurement was over your fullest area, and that is what's used on basic patterns to go and determine that extension. Now I'm going to show you how to fine tune that extension so that you're already removing or taking away some of that extra fabric that you are going to get on this area if you've got a thinner or a slimmer thigh. And then, like in my case where I've got a fuller thigh, I've always got to make sure I've got enough to cover that inner thigh. Now when we also look at pattern work, when we talk about a pants pattern, it's basically, if you imagine a skirt pattern, and I've just drawn this line down going 90 degrees into this crotch level, that is basically always where we start designing a pants with my waist measurement, my hip measurements, and then again going down, you can see or imagine that that would have been a skirt. So by taking this measurement on the full hip area, taking a percentage, that is then where we start going into this extension. So I'm just trying to again just clarify, when we're looking at the extension, it's not just this section, it's basically going down from where my fullest hip measurement was with a 90 degree into that crotch level. So this whole area is basically then my crotch extension if I'm looking at a pant pattern. And if you look at that just going all the way straight down, you can see how this then covers the inner thigh. Now when we're looking at a trouser pants, for instance, we've got a pants that is hanging straight down from our full measurement. So let's say our full hip measurement, it will hang straight from the tummy, and then also that full hip measurement. It's not cupping the buttocks, it's not cupping the front of the tummy, it's just hanging beautifully straight down. So then we know we're going to need more ease. So when we're going to be working with our thigh measurement now, just for me to show you the demonstration, then I know I've got to add on a little bit more onto my thigh measurement to actually get the correct amount of fabric going all the way around that thigh. Now again, and I'm going to keep talking about a fuller thigh and a slimmer thigh just so you can see why it's important that you know this. With that slimmer thigh measurement, if I go add that ease on there, you can see how a basic crotch extension is not going to work for my fuller thigh or your slimmer thigh. We've got to go and just fine tune it. Now again, like I said, for more of a trouser fit where we've got it hanging down our body, no cupping at the buttocks or just under the tummy, we want to take our thigh measurement and we're going to add on 9 centimeters. And I just made a note here for myself, 9 centimeters is 3.5 inches. So it's thigh measurement plus 3.5 inches. Then you're going to go to your pattern and you're going to measure this crotch level. And remember, this crotch level that you draw in, make sure it goes 90 degrees through our grain line from that crotch point to the side seam. And all I'm going to do here now, I'm going to measure from that side seam and I'm going to measure to that crotch point. I'm going to pick it up and I'm picking it up from there and I'm measuring to that side seam. So I've got basically, if I'm going to round it off, I'm going to round it off just for doing the calculations on camera to 74 centimeters, and that is about 29 1/8 of an inch that I'm working with now for my pattern that I have in front of me. Also, just to mention this, when we do any pattern work, we work on our pattern excluding seam allowance. So as you're seeing my Surfer Designs pattern here in front of me, there's no seam allowances added. So if you want to go and try this method just to go and measure a commercial pattern, remember that you just measure in from that line that you've got and go and draw a line which will be your stitching line. So whatever that pattern's seam allowance is, go and measure in and first go draw the stitching line for yourself. I don't want you to do this measurement and include seam allowance. We're working with body measurement and pattern measurement before we've added any seam allowance. Now, as I said, I've done 74 centimeters when I measured this. When I measure my upper thigh at that full part of my body, I measure 66 centimeters, and that 66 centimeters is basically 26 inches. So now for more of a trouser style leg where it's hanging straight down my body, we want to go and add on 9 centimeters, and 9 is 3.5 inches that we're going to add on to our thigh measurement. So that will then bring me to 75 centimeters. So for a trouser leg, for that slightly looser effect on this crotch line as well, remember, the more I've got on that crotch extension, the looser it's going to be on this area. It's giving me more negative space, if I can add it that way. So it's not cupping my body. So then I need, for a trouser pants, my 66 centimeters plus 9 centimeters. I've done my calculations there. It takes me to 75 centimeters, which is basically 29.5 inches. Now I can see when I measured my pattern 74. I rounded it off. Actually, in actual fact, let's just measure again. Let me just double check here so that we can talk through this whole process. I'm going to pick it up. Basically getting 73.5. So for my looser leg, I'm going to need, for my thigh, for it to work with my thigh, 75 centimeters. So I am short 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch that I am short to get that look that I want for that trouser leg. So I can now take that 1.5 centimeters or my 5/8 of an inch and divide it by 2, and we're going to add on both crotch points just to give myself just a little bit more for my thigh area so that I know I've got enough ease. And if you're going to do it, and I'm just going to see if I've got a pencil close by, that is going to be about 0.75 centimeters, or let's go 0.7. So if I'm adding it on there and I'm adding it on there, I'm going to go then and just from that point redraw back into my inner thigh line. I want to make sure that when I am going to draw that line back in, that I want to come back more or less where the knee level is going to be. So that is where I'm going to be drawing my line. Now let's say we want a slimmer fit, or in this case maybe you measured and there's too much extension on this point. You've got to go and take off a little bit. Then it's going to be the reverse of what I've done. You are going to take off whatever that amount is that you need. Let's say you needed to take off 1 centimeter in total. That is going to be 3/8 of an inch. Then I can come in on both of these points and just bring it in a little bit. Now if I want a slightly more fitted leg, let's say I'm making more of a slack style. Now a slack style is where I am slightly cupping under the bottom, and I'm also slightly cupping under my tummy, just bringing it in a little bit more. Then I'm going to need less of this extension. I've got to take some of that ease away, which will be covering the inner thigh. So then your calculation that you're going to do is to take your thigh measurement, and this time you're only adding on 6 centimeters for me. Now 6 centimeters is 2.25 of an inch. So working with my calculations again, my upper thigh is 66 centimeters. Plus my 6 centimeters, that takes me to 72 centimeters. Now I'm working here in centimeters because I'm more used to metric than inches. But as I said, you're going to take thigh measurement plus 2.25 inch onto that thigh measurement. So I'm going to take my 66 plus my 6 centimeters, that's taking me to 72, and that is just over 28.25 of an inch that I need to measure. So now I go back to my pattern, and I'm going to again, and I know I've told you my measurement again, but I'm just doing it, I'm repeating it so that you can follow along. Again, I'm going to measure on the crotch level, and I'm picking it up. I measure to that point, I'm picking it up, putting it on my point on the front pattern, going to that side seam. Again, it's 73.5. 73.5 is just short of that 29 inches that I've got. So I know I actually, for a slightly more fitted slack style leg that I want, I need 72 centimeters. So I have got 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch too much on this area. Now I'm going to take half of that measurement again, and I'm going to take it off because now I've got too much of that crotch extension. So I need to take off half on the back, half on the front. So it's about 0.75 millimeters. So that is going to be, let's just go to inches again. It's just over 1/4 of an inch that I need to do on both of these points. So I'm just going to go and measure this, and I'm going to draw a line now to show you how I go back to that. Let's just make it there, and I just want to do it here, just so how I take it back to that inner seam that I'm going to be working with. And I'm going to be working with, let's go with a colored pencil. So I made my mark over there, and I'm just doing that. and I've made my mark over there. So that is basically where I've got to come in. Now with my designing stylus, which is our Sure Fit Design ruler that includes all my curves, it's got my back crotch curve, front crotch curve, it's got hip curves in there. I'm going to use this now to just go and correct that inner seam. Now again, I'm taking it back to where I've got my more or less my knee level, because I'm just perfecting this crotch extension. I'm not changing the style of the leg. I'm not coming in narrower or anything like that. That, as I said, below the crotch level, that is going to be style or the silhouette of the pants that you want to make for yourself. But I'm just going to pick up my line and I'm going to bring it in a little bit, and I can move it up or down. I usually slide this side or that edge of my ruler on my line that I've already drawn, and I can slide it down until I can see, well, I'm going to be picking up that point where I want to go in, and I can see I'm still picking up that part of the line over there. I think let's go do it in my red marker. It's going to be more visual for you to see. So I'm going to go and literally I'm just moving up or down, trying to get a smooth transition from this inner seam that I've already got there. And I'm going to come down there and I can see, I think that is going to give me a good line. I've got a slightly thicker point here, so I'm going to be maybe just off a little bit. But can you see how I just come and I bring it in, and I'm just going to be basically removing that from my pattern. Now on my front pattern piece, I already don't have quite such a curve, because the pattern that I'm working has already been more or less fitted to my body, and I always need to reduce on my front crotch. So here it's going to be more of a straight line. If I can't get a good curved line, go to your straight line, and I can see I can pick up a straight line. And again, we want to come down closer to the knee level, so I've got a good transition going down into that inseam. Can you see already I'm removing this off my pattern? So that is already giving me a snugger fit on this inner thigh area, reducing some of the excess ease that I could have had. And this is really for you a starting point to go and perfect that crotch extension when you are fitting your pants. And you can play with it a little bit more. You can really go and say, you know what, I need to maybe on that front, because I do feel that I've still got too much on this area, I can go and just take off maybe a little bit more. This is really fine tuning it. The measurements I'm giving you to add on to your thigh measurement is really a basis that's used in pattern design. And remember, we can always tweak it just by going up a little bit or going down a little bit so that it's working with my body. But when you're going to make these changes, you are going to have to go and do a test sample to see how that crotch line is now fitting on your body. Now, one thing that you do have to consider now as well, that like on this areas where I've gone in, I've now gone and reduced my crotch length. Remember, we said crotch length was from waist point all the way through, and then going all the way through to that front waist length over there. I've now basically gone and removed 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. So that means on this one where I've done about 7 millimeters, it's just more than that 1/4 of an inch. I might want to, for my fitting, just go and add it on a little bit on my crotch length over there. So I'm staying with the same crotch length. I'm not affecting the crotch length at all. I can then, when I fit it on my body, say, you know what, I didn't have to go and add it on because this has just perfected the fit on that inner thigh for me, and I feel that I don't need that extra length. But it's always best to play safe. It's always best to just give yourself that extra bit, because once we've got that fabric for the fitting, we can't go back. Now, one way that I can do it, because it was such a small amount, is actually to just add it onto the waist level over there. Another way is where you can go and cut your pattern open on a line that you draw, and this is then a pivot point, and I can open it up on that area as well. But like I said, mine was a small amount. I can literally go and just measure it up there and then redraw it back to my side seam, and I will do it on the front as well, just to play it safe for the fitting, to make sure my crotch length is still going to work with my body. I would say most of the time when I have done this change for some of my customers, it actually fitted their body so much better. They had no bagginess happening on this area, and we really didn't need to go and do too much changing on the waist. But you working with your personal measurements, you might be taking off more than what I'm taking off my pattern because of my thigh measurement. So there you do have to consider your crotch length as well. So this was really just demonstrating to you that when we're working with our personal body measurements, it's not just about working with that crotch length, working with our hip measurement. You know what? Our thigh measurement is also important when we are drafting that pants pattern. How many times have you gone and made a pants and it just sits beautifully, but you've just got so much excess happening because of the extra fabric that you've got on the thigh? And then we want to start playing, and we want to start coming in on the side seam, we want to start taking away on other areas, and we're actually causing more of a fit issue for ourselves. This is really that inner thigh area where we've got to go and perfect it. So I want you to go back to your pattern, and specifically now I'm talking to my Schurfer Designs customers. Go and measure that extension, make sure that that extension is going to work with your thigh measurement. Now when we do any changes to our pattern and we have done a change to that crotch point, now we've always got to go back and just perfect our pattern, and that is where we're going to put this inner seam on top of each other again. And I'm going to make sure that when I've got those lines together, that I've got a smooth transition from the back to the front. I've got no point happening on that area. Now in my next video that I am going to be doing for you on pants fitting, I am going to be talking about actually perfecting that area. I'm going to show you my preferred way of actually fixing that little hiccup that we sometimes get there, and that also then helps perfect that front fit of my crotch even a little bit more. So that is going to be the next video, on taking you through the steps on how you've got to go and then just true that pattern, so that you know that when you're sewing it together, you're not going to get a fitting issue because of your pattern not being accurate, and that you had to go and sew two seams together and there's no smooth transition from the one to the other pattern piece. So that is going to be the next one that I'm going to do for you on pants fitting. But in the meantime, go perfect that crotch extension, go measure your thigh, go measure your pattern, and go and look at those changes. Is there a big difference to what you've got in your pattern? I would love to know, so let me know below in the comments. But take care, and until the next video, happy sewing.